Hello everyone, I want to discuss the Italian opening in this video for beginners. A very quick introduction to the opening and you would understand the ideas behind the moves that you make, and this happens quite a lot in the beginner level. So the first move is e4. As you know, most people play e4 at the beginning level, and the reason for this move is that you control the center. As you might know that the central squares are very important in chess, and the person who controls this would control the game. Now, so the first move, e4, you occupy one of these squares and then you control the other squares either side of it. So the primary four squares, which are the central squares, are the important ones, and the secondary central squares are these ones. You should know that this is a wider center that you probably need to control. So let's move on, and the black responds with e5 with the same idea, occupying the center and controlling the squares, the central square and f4 in this case. So we move our knight, applying pressure on the central squares again, and the black would neutralize our pressure on the central squares by moving the knight to c6. Then we develop our bishop. So the other thing you should know is that you try to develop your pieces at the beginning of the game and try to bring up your pieces out, and normally it's the knights before the bishops, and you try to develop them in a good squares where they can attack the enemy and they can have a better control over the board. So in this case, the bishop is applying pressure on the central square, developing the piece, preparing the king for castling, and also applying some pressure on the f7 pawn, which is weak and it's only supported by the king. So let's move on, and black does the same thing. So as you can see that black is following a similar sort of pattern of movement, and it's got the same principles. So again we move to c3, controlling the d4 square, and it's just preparing for eventual d4 to control the center and move our pieces to the center and open the bishop and so on and so forth. Black develops the knight, prepares the king for castling, and also applies pressure on the central squares. So in this case you can see that e4 pawn is unprotected and that can potentially be taken, although not in this case because that pawn is a bit weak on e5, so that can easily be retaken, but nonetheless we would need to protect that with d3, and black also moves to d6, opening the line for the bishop, and in this case we castle, and black castles as well. It's very important to castle your king and move it to safety. So we move to h3 to prevent the bishop from coming to g4, pinning our knight and causing a bit of a problem here, and black does exactly the same. So now the other moves for developing the pieces are as follows. For this one, the knight comes out, and the idea for the knight is the knight goes here, or to g3. So in this case black moves to a6, trying to push the pawn forward and disrupt the bishop a bit. So again, one of the ideas for most of the openings is that you centralize your rooks and connect the rooks as part of your developing moves. So in this case, we move rook to e1, putting pressure on the center, and whenever that file opens, we can control that, and black does the same. So now we move bishop away from that attack of b5, keeping the pressure on f7. Black moves forward to gain some space on the queen side, and as mentioned before, the knight finds its route to g3 or e3 depending on the situation. So the bishop can either develop to e7, d7, e6 or g4, but that has been prevented now, so black decides to go to d7. The knight finds its route and the rook controls the b file. So this is a very brief introduction to the game, to this opening. So you don't need to know a lot of these details, as long as you know the first few moves and know the ideas behind why we are doing certain things. That is probably more than enough for ELOs under 1000, and if you want to know more, you just need to increase your knowledge about the further moves and the ideas behind each one. So the Giuoco Piano is a very calm positional game. It actually means calm game, Giuoco Piano. And it's one of the oldest openings. You can see that the developing moves are very natural and everything opens up, or the pieces are developed in the right places, and it's very natural. It's not any ambiguities or ambiguities that you need to know a lot of things about this opening, about the opening principles. It's just developing your pieces very naturally. The knight normally comes out on the natural squares, and the bishops get out as soon as the pawns are moved, and so on and so forth. So what are the ideas behind each one? So I'll briefly discuss the ideas for white, and then ideas for black. So the ideas for white is you develop your pieces. As you can see, you develop your knight, develop your bishop, and you bring your pieces into the right places, as we said. So now you've got a good development of your pieces. Your bishop is open. You've castled. The queen is going to move out of the way, and the rooks will get connected, and that'll be your opening phase done. And the same with black. They're moving the pieces into natural squares, and as soon as the queen moves out of the way, the rooks are connected, and the game enters the middle game. So one of the ideas for white in this case is the c3 and the d3 move. So the purpose of these is that eventually you want to move to d4. So these pawns are supporting that idea. So as you break into the center and you start causing problems for the black at the right time. So when that opens, the bishop can either stay on that line or can move to c2 and apply some pressure on the b1 h7 diagonal. So you basically can try to control the d4 square and the f5 square by moving your pieces. So these are the two key squares that you need to consider. So obviously you want to try to move your pawn into d4, and also you're controlling the f5 with your e4 and the knight in this case. So what are the ideas for black then? So the black has got a good pawn structure. As you can see, the pawns are nicely placed, and it'll be the pawn structures would be important at the end game. So again, the development of the pieces are very natural. So the knights have moved into the natural squares. The bishop has come out, and the other bishop is controlling as many squares as it can at this stage. Obviously, can't control these. It is while it's controlling it, but it can't move into these squares at the moment. And the idea for black, on the other hand, is try to break into d5 at some point and open up the position, and also keeping control of the f5 as much as possible. So one of the ideas, obviously, for black side is to develop the bishop into one of these squares, depending on the situation, how the game goes. And that's probably all you need to know about this opening from both sides. So the one advantage of this opening is that you don't have a direct clash right at the beginning. There are no pawn exchanges, there are no piece exchanges, and the opening is very calm, enters into the middle game without any problems and without any traps and opening traps that you might fall into or not know. So you develop your piece naturally and you enter the middle game. And this gives you the opportunity to understand your pawn structures and to think about your ideas for moving into the middle game, improving your piece positions, and where to attack, how to develop further and gain advantages slowly. So what are the disadvantages of this opening? The disadvantage is that you don't gain a very quick advantage in the game. So it's very slow at the beginning, and you have to be patient. You have to work at things slowly and try to improve your position bit by bit until you get to a winning position potentially. So the other problem is if you play slow and you don't do the right moves, you don't make the right moves, the opponent can develop their pieces better and they can control the game much better, and you could lose your initiative and could potentially lead to losing the game. So as I said, this is ideal for people who want to avoid a lot of opening theory and sort of clash at the beginning and want to enter the middle game peacefully without any drama. So you should know the pawn structures and try to remember the structures of where pieces belong and what are the ideas, and that's all I can say about this opening. For the beginner level, you don't need to know all of these lines. As long as you know the ideas, I think that's probably more than enough for you. I mean, if you know up to this point, let's say for an elo of 1,000, it's probably good enough, and you know the ideas of what comes next.